Thank you. If I were to ask you to imagine what the future workplace would look like, would you tell me it's a world in which we expand our possibilities as humans, or one where we discover our own limitations? Now, it might sound like I posed a very existential question for what is effectively the first 10 seconds of my talk, but what I actually did is I ran my prompt through ChatGPT to see what it would tell me. Now, obviously, we have to make a distinction between what's meaningful human analysis and what's simply some words that came out of a text generation algorithm. But my point is that we all have to agree that we've come to the realization that artificial intelligence and automation as a whole has gotten really, really, really good, and maybe even a little too good for our own liking. Since the Industrial Revolution, power looms have replaced hand weavers, and robotic arms have replaced factory workers. And in every so-called wave of automation, we've had critics, notably like Karl Marx, who have told us how bad this is for the working class. Yet it seems, as a person standing here today, as a person in the audience like yourself, that 200 years later, we've come to adapt to our situation. And we've come to have a livelihood that is a magnitude times better than we could have ever imagined it would have been just 200 years ago. But with this third so-called wave of automation, there seems to be a unique uneasiness. And that's because a lot of the most well-respected, well-valored jobs in society, jobs such as teachers, doctors, lawyers, mechanics, these kinds of jobs now have to compete with automation tools. Then what really is left for any of us? Now, it might sound like this is a problem that's in a far, far away dystopia, but the fact is, it's a problem that's right here at our doorstep. Consider, for example, the Screen Actors and Screenwriters strike of 2023, lasting over half a year. The least of my concerns was that I couldn't watch like the 10th reboot of Godzilla vs. Kong, because the fact is, it was the first time that I stood back, that my family stood back, and we watched as people who had built their careers decades upon decades watch as if they walked into the studio one day, find out that their job had been replaced by an AI tool halfway across the world. And it's even more enraging and even more shocking because it's these same Hollywood studios that brought us movies like WALL-E, iRobot, and Minority Report that I'm sure every single one of you has seen before. But when we talk about a total robot revolution, that is not the future that we're going to live in. But a world full of automation is one where we have to ask three very, very important questions. First, is total automation even possible? Is it true that my neighbor who's a lawyer and my family member who's a welder, are their jobs actually going to go to a robot or to a software? Secondly, is it true that automation is even possible and even effective in that sense? Is it true that we're going to stand here and watch as these jobs get trampled by automation technology, or are we going to take a stand? Is it the kind of thing that we actually want? And finally, is total automation even effective? Is it true that I want my teacher to be an AI software because it's going to make me 100 times smarter? Or is it actually true that I want the dear teachers that I know and love to teach me? To consider this, let's look at 3 case studies from 3 different parts of the workforce, starting with the professional. I hear a line of reasoning that goes something like this. Take an AI program, maybe even ChatGPT. On a good day, arguably, it can write better than us, it can read better than us, it can research better than us. And if this is what the average professional does, then what really is left for any of us? But the fact is, when we talk about these jobs, when we talk about the academics, the lawyers, the teachers, the HR people, we realize these jobs are far more in depth. Which is to say, if the automation tool can take much of the heavy lifting, the daily writing emails and the writing reports, it leaves these people with more time to interface, to discuss, to experiment, to peer review. Those are the things that matter. But at the same time, this is not holding true in every single case. In the case of the creative, in the case of the freelancer, we've already seen how much of an impact automation tools have had. Because unfortunately, they fight on a frontier that is really, really difficult for humans to fight on. And that is a frontier of scale. That is to say that maybe the average author can put out 2, 3, even 4 books in a year. But AI or an automation tool, 300 or 400 per month. The problem is when we have such a saturated market in the creative industry, there are people who are willing to purchase a derivative product if it means that they can save a couple of bucks. And what that means is the people that we care about a lot, people like musicians, authors, artists, screenwriters, these are the people who are going to suffer because only a few of them can actually make it to the top where it's profitable to even exist. But thirdly, there's also the place where automation can be more effective. Automation can really help in industries that are forward-facing. That is to say, the skilled trades or medicine, where they take increasingly unsafe jobs out of the hands of people who are doing them right now. Jobs such as the tunneling bore that can now be automated means that people can focus more on doing forward-facing field work that matters far more than some kind of dangerous activity in a mine. But even in an industry like medicine, we've seen how automation helps improve things. That's why just this year alone, the FDA approved a robotic surgeon that helps surgeons get their job done even faster. On a spectrum of jobs then, the jobs that are most impacted, that are most at risk of having that damage done by automation, are jobs in the middle skill and middle income section. These are your logistics workers, your drivers, but also other jobs like accountants and financiers. And the problem here is their valuable contribution can be brought down to 3 things that automation is really, really good at doing. The first thing it can do is that it has a clear scope. That is to say that these jobs are very easy to narrow down, and that means that there are also clear metrics that can be used to define these jobs. That's why I can sit on my computer one day and launch an accounting program that I can send to 100,000 people, but it's far more difficult to teach 100,000 accountants to do their job perfectly like an automation tool could. But on top of all of that, insult to injury is that these tools have clear metrics, which means that they compete in the area of iterability. That means that tomorrow's product is going to be 10 times better, and next year's product is going to effectively make today's product redundant. And there's no way that an employee of sorts can fight on those kinds of grounds. It's just too difficult. Here's where we have to take a lesson from the history books. Because we know what happens when people lose their jobs to automation. We know that what happened in the past is that people were relegated to a lower class and relegated with no recourse or any way of improving their socioeconomic standing. But with 300 million jobs on the line, that's simply not the kind of thing that we can take. It's not the risk that any of us are willing to take. Because the fact is, you are right. We are in an unprecedented situation. The nature of automation has changed so much that the way that we change our living is going to change forever. And in unprecedented times like this one, the only thing that we can do is do unprecedented actions. That means that we have to start scrutinizing automation right now. Because we can see automation a decade, maybe 2 decades, maybe even 3 decades down the line. But we should not wait for it to be on our news headlines for us to start taking action. That's why we have to reskill workers right now. Because I know every career person out there, that it takes decades upon decades to build your career properly. And on a more personal note, as a youth who's simply just entering the workforce today, the ways that we enter the workforce has to change. Because if I can't shadow or intern as a job because that's been taken up by an automation, or because that job no longer even exists, then that is a serious, serious issue. The workplace of tomorrow is not a robot revolution. It is not black and white, and there's no clear solution that I can provide to you. But what I can tell you is that automation is neither good nor bad. It's not the boogeyman that we have to run away from. It is simply a tool that exists. Ultimately, the workplace of tomorrow is the workplace that we are going to shape it to be. Thank you very much.